Hi. So this video is an attempt to try and make some sense out of the monthly deaths from COVID in Canada. So this was partially inspired by effort on the part of someone working at Johns Hopkins University. I think her name was Genevieve Briand, something like this. This is a little article about her. So what she was doing is that she was comparing the deficit in deaths from other kinds of causes and comparing those to the deaths attributed to COVID. And she found that there was this strong correlation suggesting that a lot, if not most, of the deaths attributed to COVID may well have just been attributed to other causes. And this is a table. This is an article about her thing. Her article eventually got taken down, and it was unclear to me whether it got taken down because it was considered controversial or just the fact that some of her math doesn't add up. Like this table was her table. It was in the original video, which still is available online. You can still find the video, even though Johns Hopkins, I believe, took it down. It's still available online. But these, it seems as though she's saying these blue numbers should add up to the numbers in the gray, but they don't. These columns don't add up. So I don't know what she was doing. Maybe, I don't know if I misunderstood. Apparently other people don't seem to think what she was doing was adding up. So, but the benefit of her video was that she did sort of walk you through exactly what she had done. And so I was thinking I would do that. I would walk through what she did and try and see how that works out for me in terms of the numbers. But then I had a thought. Before doing that, I thought maybe I would do it for Canada because I live in Canada. So I thought, first I'll actually give it a try and see what I find if I look at the results for Canada. And so that's what brings me to this thing, the idea of doing this. And so this video is a report on what I've done. Now, I'll just say as a qualification, I'm making this video primarily for people that I know. And what I'm about to say, the people who know me already know this, but if this video leaks out and, gets passed on to anyone else who doesn't know me, and by the way, if this, some of the people, including some of my family members who I'm sending this to are pretty sharp math people. And if they look it over and they think that what I've done here is accurate, then maybe I'll actually go to post it online on YouTube or whatever online, so others can have a chance to see it if it stands up. And like I say, if it doesn't stand up, it might get leaked out to someone. So the bottom line being here, if you don't know me, what you should know is that I'm not a math person. I'm a mathophobe. In fact, I dropped math. The first chance they gave me in school to drop math, I dropped it. The school system I was going to, I think grade 9 was the last year I had to take math, and I just got it as soon as I could. Now I actually regret that, and I've spent the last few years of my life trying to recuperate or recover somewhat from that self-imposed denial of exposure to math. So I'm trying to overcome the phobic part, but I don't pretend to be a really astute math person. But I mean, what I'm doing here, I don't think requires you to be terribly astute. It's mostly pretty basic stuff. And the only thing that's complicated is running some averages, which the Excel sheet does for you. So, I mean, I'm assuming that's all right. I did, and the numbers you'll see, I have gone through them. I did it all once, and then I went through a second time and checked every single number. And I did find one case where I made a wrong number, which I had to then go back and redo, I think 3 or 4 maybe not that many, maybe around 3 calculations because of that one number that was wrong. But it was a small difference, almost made no difference. It wouldn't really have mattered if I hadn't caught that error. It would have made no significant impact on the findings. So I think what I've done here is very basic. It makes sense to me, but maybe I'm wrong. So, I invite everyone who sees this to fact check me and make sure that I'm not got something fundamentally mistaken here. So here's how I proceeded. So I'll give you a breakdown of what I actually did. So I went to the let's go back here. I went to the Statistics Canada website and found this whatever you call these, sort of a dynamic table where you can sort of tailor it to the results you want. So this is called Selected Grouped Causes of Death by Month. So I made some changes here. As it came up, it was all provinces. So I went through, so it said geography, so I chose Canada. And I unclicked here so that this would only give me a Canadian. And of course, there's no reason you can't do this for all of the provinces. In fact, that might be a useful thing for others to do, but that's not what I did. So month of death is good. So causes of death, I went here and I made sure it was everything, all causes of death. And there's something I'll have to say about this actually in a minute. All causes of death. So 17 of potential 17 items here you see have been selected, so apply that. And you can see this is for 2020, so I went to reference period and I went to 2015 to 2020 and apply that. All right, coming up. Okay, so there's the table that I worked with. So here you can see it goes across, has the year and the months of each year. And if you go all the way to the end, you see 2020. It only has it only goes to August here, and the first deaths occurred in March. So there's nothing after, like in September. You see there's nothing here, and there's nothing for January and February. Like if I go down to actually we have COVID here, you see there's for January and February there's no COVID deaths. They only start occurring here as of March through into August, and of course there's more, but we don't have any information after September. So that's that would be 6, I believe, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6 months. There's only 6 months that I'm able to compare on, but it's better than nothing. And so this is the way that I'm approaching this. Now along here you have all the different causes of death, and so I went and created for myself a Excel. I'm also like totally inexperienced with Excel. I've used it the occasional time over many years, so I had to give myself a quick refresher course. But then, so what I did was I went out and I picked out 5 illnesses that I thought could be confused with or somehow entangled with death by COVID. And so these 5 are the malignant neoplasms, which are basically cancers. This says April because it started doing April, but it changed. Not changed. Just get rid of that now. All right. I have that. I have heart disease, cerebrovascular diseases, which I gather are strokes. Chronic lower respiratory diseases such as bronchitis, emphysema, and asthma. And then lastly, I have influenza and pneumonia being considered in one category. So these were the 5 that I picked upon. Now, I thought maybe in the interest of clarifying some nomenclature, just so I can make it simpler as I go on. I hope to be able to make it simpler as I go on, so I'm not tripping over my words too much. So these 5, which we just, you see highlighted here, were the 5 that I just showed you that I have listed on the Excel table. These 5, I'm just going to call the 5, right? If I say the 5, and you can see some of them are groups, right? You know, like bronchitis, emphysema, and asthma, and influenza, and pneumonia. Some of them are groups, you know, so there's technically more than 5 things here. And I guess there's different kinds of cancers too, but whatever. But I'm just calling these the 5, just for simplicity. So when I say the 5, that's what I'm referring to, these things. When I say the average, what I'm talking about is the average number of deaths per month from the previous 5 years. And this is wrong, I can see here. Let's correct this too. So I'm doing editing on the fly. Is this right? All right, so it's obviously 2015 to 2019. All right, so that's what the average is. I looked at the years for any particular month, so say the month of April. I looked at every April from 2015 to 2019. I recorded it all and then determined that the average for those 5 were. So when I refer to the average, that's what I'm referring to. The average from the previous 5 years for any particular month. And then I'm going to use the term the deficit. The deficit refers to the number of 2020 deaths per month that were below the average, right? And I remember when I say the average, what I mean is that the deficit is the number of 2020 deaths per month that's below the average of the number of deaths per month from the previous 5 years for the 5, which are cancer, heart disease, stroke, bronchitis, etc., influenza, etc. Okay, so if you're unclear about my terms, hopefully I will apply them consistently. If you're unclear about my terms, you can always come back to this part of the video and refresh yourself. This is what those terms mean. Okay, so I want to make one other point here. It's hard to identify these things. Now that, you know, there's other death things here. Like it might have been interesting to look at diabetes, or, you know, even Alzheimer's. I always say that wrong. Alzheimer's, I guess. That probably might have been interesting to include, but I didn't. And there's some other things here. There is this one, all other causes of death. And I you know, I have no idea what that is, but you can see it's, you know, it's not an insignificant number. I mean, it ranges per month. It ranges from something in the, you know, in the 5,000 range, right? And here, you know, we get up. Where was that? I just saw 700 somewhere. Yeah, I was over here. It gets up to not 700, 7,000. So it gets up to 7,000 there. Right, so these are not tiny numbers, right? There's another 7,000 over here. So so these are not tiny numbers. There's all other causes, and I have no idea what all these other causes are. I mean, one thing they don't have on this list anywhere is homicide, or, you know, people killed through foul play or something, right? So, you know, I assume that's in that list, but I don't know what else is in it, right? So there could be other deaths in there, or other causes of death that would be relevant and maybe should be included in my 5 and stretch it out to a 6 or a 7 or something rather than just the 5, right? But I don't know, so I can't. So anyway, so the point is that I partially out of choice, partially just the limitations of what's made available here, I've reduced it down to these 5 things, being the diseases or illnesses, whatever you want to call it, that I'm focusing upon when I'm trying to figure out what the relationship is. Is there a deficit, and what it is? So I started off by looking at April, as you can see up here, April. And the reason I chose April, and by the way, that table that I showed you from Brienne, from Johns Hopkins, that was April 2. And the reason she chose April is because it was the most deadly month. And so I decided to start off looking at April 2, because it also in Canada was the most deadly month. And you can see down here that this is actually the total number. All right, so I just had a moment there where I got sidetracked. I had to edit that out. Because I tell you, I'm not a math person, so I'm trying to keep track of my own methodology here is challenging for me. Okay, so as I said, I was starting out with April because it was the most deadly month for COVID. So then what I did So for each of these illnesses, I've already looked at them. So for cancer, I went through, and for 2015 through to 19, I recorded the numbers of deaths each of those a month. And then in this last one here, I did the 5-year average. It's a simple thing to do. You just put this down here, and there's average. You choose that, and there you go. And this creates your average for you, right? So then I have the average for each of those months. And then I looked at what the death toll was for that particular disease in 2020. And I found out, whether there was a deficit or a surplus. And so you can see here in April, for cancer, there was a deficit of 451. So that is to say, in 2020, 451 fewer people died of cancer, or are reported to have died of cancer, than the average of the previous 5 years. This being the average, right, and these being the 5 years that come that funnel into that average. And I did it. So I did the same thing for heart disease and stroke and bronchitis and all those things, and influenza and pneumonia and all this. And in all these cases, you see there's a deficit. Fewer people died from each of those illnesses in 2020 for each of the 6 months that I looked at. Or excuse me, in April. I'm just talking about April here, but no. So in April, more people fewer people died in 2020 from those diseases, those 5 diseases, or illnesses, than the average of the previous 5 years. Okay, so I got that straight. And so you see, for each one, that's the case, right? And so the total number of deaths from COVID in April was this 4,275, and we see that the deficit, then remember, I told you how I'm using the word deficit, the deficit was 1,099. So that means that that it's reasonable to assume, given this not insignificant drop in deaths from these 5 illnesses, from the 5, that it's possible that as many as a quarter of the reported COVID deaths may have actually been the result of people dying from these other things, from heart disease or stroke or whatever, rather than actually dying from cancer, right? So that was sort of my first pass at it in April. I thought, well, okay, well, that's sort of interesting. So then I had another thought, and again, I have no background in this math type stuff. It just was intuitive. I just thought, well, that's what the result is of a really deadly month. But I thought, so what if I just have a look at a month that's a lot less deadly, right? So you see there's quite a variety here, right? Like, so the first, I guess this is in March, was 270. Then we had this huge April. So I thought, well, why don't I look at something like July? Like, what happened in July? So, as you can see, then I look at July. Follow all the same processes here, the averages. Here's your average, then the 20 deaths, then subtract them, and then add this up, and you get a deficit. Well, as you saw there, the total COVID death count in July was only 235 people in Canada, but the deficit, and you know what I mean by deficit now, right? The deficit was 2,319. Like 2,319 fewer people died of cancer, heart disease, stroke, bronchitis, influenza, all this, than did in the average of the previous 5 years compared to 2020. I mean, that's huge. So that got me thinking, well, something else is going on here, right? I mean, the immediate obvious conclusion that struck me and I don't know if this is true, but it seems like the obvious conclusion is that people whom statistically, based on the previous 5 years, people who statistically were going to die in July from cancer or heart disease or any of these other illnesses, these people ended up dying back in April when they got COVID, which complicated their situation and they died, right? So this is not, to me, this is not, a nothing point, right? First of all, one can say, well, it's easy for you to, if that's what you're doing, and I don't think that's not what I intend to do. I can see people can interpret me as saying, well, it doesn't matter. So they died a few months earlier. Well, I'm sure those people would have rather had those few months to spend with their family. If it were me, I would rather have, I assume, maybe if I've got these diseases, maybe I'm in real misery and I don't necessarily want to live a few more months. I don't know. But it's certainly reasonable to think these people would like to, and you'd like to have them, to have the opportunity to, to spend a few more months with their families before they die. But my problem here is that the building up of these COVID death numbers, as though without COVID, all these people wouldn't be dying, that doesn't make sense. I mean, when you look at these numbers here, it doesn't make sense, right? I mean, it appears quite clear if you just compare April and July. It seems, the only explanation I can see is precisely that these people who would have normally statistically, based upon the average of the previous 5 years, would have died in July, ended up dying in April or May, but there was also a large number of deaths. So that made me think, well, I better go through, all 6 months. There's only 6 months here, so I'll go through them all. And by the way, I did this all by hand, right? They actually allow you, as if I go back and show you here, hold on, they actually allow you here. Where's the share? You can actually download. You open this, you get download options. So I tried downloading a few of these, but because I have no experience working with this stuff, I couldn't figure out, the tables that they download. I couldn't figure out how to make them work. So it was useless. So I ended up just literally going through it hand by hand, number by number, and sort of inputting each one in. And like I said, I did a second go and found that I made exactly one mistake. So I actually did a pretty good job, considering how tiresome it got at a certain point. So anyway, so I thought, well, it's only 6 months, so I should go and do this all for 6 months, right? And this is the stuff that I found, right? So if we look at March, even in March, there's only 270 COVID deaths, and the deficit is 855 for the 5, right? May was another year with a lot of deaths, right? So another month, rather, with a lot of deaths, right? So we had 3,570, but even then the deficit was 1,606. So we're still looking at over a third being covered by the deficit. In June, there was only 705 COVID deaths, but there were 1,786 deficit, right? People who would normally, based on the average of the previous 5 years, would have been expected to die in June that didn't die this June, presumably because they were dying back in April and May, right? And then lastly, we come to August, where only 150 people are recorded as dying, but we have a deficit of nearly 3,500 people who would have died normally in August that weren't dying in August, based on the average from the previous 5 years. So here's the thing then. This ends up being, and I don't know what the answer to this is, and I put this video out in large part to see if people can give me an answer, either can point out where I've done something wrong in my basic math, whether I've done something wrong in my conceptualization of the issue. But if I wound up in a situation where the deficit was pretty close to the same number as the actual total amount of COVID deaths over this 6-month period that we're looking at, then I would say, well, maybe, COVID isn't really killing hardly anybody that wasn't going to be dead, within a few months anyways. But the weird thing is, is that the total COVID deaths for those 6 months were only 9,200, where the deficit was over 11,000. So I don't know what's going on. I mean, I just, because I've got so little experience in this, I just assume that that I'm making a mistake. But I've gone through the numbers twice. Everything, as far as I can tell, seems to be right. Is there something conceptually I've gotten wrong here? So so I don't know what's going on. So I just want to emphasize again that I'm not saying it's inconsequential that these people missed out on 2, 3, 4 months of their life. Maybe 5 months of their life. I'm not saying that's inconsequential, but what I'm saying is that there's, in the way that this is dealt with, both in the media and by public health officials, leads me to interpret it as scaring people into thinking that there's this whole swath of people who would not be dead in the same year, in the same summer, etc., if it wasn't for this killer virus. But that doesn't appear to be true at all. And like I said, I don't know how to explain how the deficit is actually larger than the total COVID deaths. I don't know, there's your deficit again, there's your total COVID deaths. I don't know how to explain that, what's going on there, but whatever the story is that's going on there, it just doesn't seem to me credible to be trying to present this virus as some horrific killer. I mean, it's killing people who were going to be dead within a few months anyways. Again, I'm not saying that's inconsequential. We shouldn't care about that, but when you put it in that context, I think it makes the virus seem a lot less scary. And people would be a lot less prone to react in a panicky way, and might be less willing to accept some of these draconian public health measures that are being imposed on people, which don't appear as though it's doing much of benefit beyond, maybe and maybe not allowing some people to live a few months longer. And of course, at tremendous cost to the economy, to the emotional well-being of younger people who are virtually no deaths from this disease. We know this from looking at other data. So this, I'm shocked, right? I'm shocked. Like I said, I was going to start it off just to do Canada as a dry run before looking at the States, but I wasn't expecting anything like this. I don't know what more to make of it. So I just thought I'd make this video and publicize this information initially to people who know me, and you can all look it over and see if it makes sense to you or I've done something crazily wrong, and I'll happily redo the calculations if I have. And if not, then if you don't know me and you're seeing this, it's probably because the people I ran it by thought that there was nothing wrong, so I'm posting the video. So so that's that. Please let me know what you think. And that's it for now. Thanks. Bye.